Post-Impressionism 2. Post-Impressionist painters use color and visible brushstrokes to convey emotion. Paul Gauguin and Vincent Van Gogh painted with the vibrant colors of their predecessors, but both painters believed that the Impressionist style was too restricting. Here's Wheatfield with Crows by Vincent Van Gogh in 1890, and La Orana Maria by Paul Gauguin, 1891. Advanced prep. This lesson includes La Orana Maria by Paul Gauguin. This famous work of art falls into the category known as a nude. While the general culture contains a great deal of material that demeans the human body, you may wish to help your student understand that at least since the time of ancient Greece and Rome, many outstanding artists have tried in a variety of works, both secular and religious, to show the beauty, strength, and dignity of the unclothed human form. Gauguin and Van Gogh, an extraordinary partnership. Seldom before or since has the art world witnessed a summit of creative genius as great as what occurred during 2 short months in the fall of 1888. Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh had come to the French town of Arles earlier that year, soon renting a yellow house that doubled as his studio and the focus of a series of paintings. He hoped to found an artist colony in Arles, and he convinced his friend and fellow post-impressionist Paul Gauguin to join him there in October. Imagine Leonardo and Michelangelo sharing a studio, or Rembrandt and Vermeer painting side by side. These scenarios may be tantalizing historical what-ifs, but the collaboration between these two giants of 19th century art was quite real. During the brief period in which they shared the small yellow house in Arles, their output was both prolific and inspired. Sometimes Van Gogh would follow Gauguin's preferred method of painting in the studio from memory. On other occasions, Gauguin would accompany his friend to scenic locales around Arles for the plein air approach to painting. Explore 2 painters' activity on the next screen. To see works that Van Gogh and Gauguin painted on the same day in Arles in the autumn of 1888. Here we have sunflowers. Van Gogh painted sunflowers and placed it in Gauguin's room for his arrival in Arles. 2 painters. Van Gogh and Gauguin often made excursions to areas in and around Arles to paint what they saw. And one day in 1888, the 2 painters set up their easels at the ancient Roman burial site of Les Allescamps in Arles. Each painter created his own interpretation of scenes from the burial ground in these 2 paintings. A brief, tempestuous union. Collaboration between the 2 artists soon began to deteriorate, but not as one might expect, out of egotism or jealousy. Van Gogh, in fact, looked up to the older painter as a mentor, while Gauguin considered himself a rebel immune to the art world's petty squabbles. They agreed about many areas of art and shared a fascination with color, but their mealtime discussions over aesthetics became, as Van Gogh observed, excessively electric. That both men suffered from clinical depression, seizures, and other undiagnosed mental illnesses only added to the tension in their cramped quarters as winter set in. Finally, just before Christmas in 1888, Gauguin announced that he was returning to Paris. Van Gogh flew into a frenzy and threatened him with a straight razor. After Gauguin fled, Van Gogh, in a fit of anguish, cut off a part of his own left ear. It was a tragic climax to, though not quite the end of, their artistic alliance. They never saw each other again, but the 2 artists continued their heartfelt and headstrong debates about art by letter until Van Gogh's death in July 1890, just 2 years later. Here we have Van Gogh's self-portrait with bandaged ear. Paul Gauguin was born in Paris in 1848. When he was 3 years old, his family moved to Peru. His father died on the trip there, and his mother, a woman of Spanish nobility, decided to stay in Peru with the children. 4 years later, the family returned to France. At 17, Gauguin joined the Navy, and after his discharge became a stockbroker in Paris. Gauguin spent his free time going to museums, talking about paintings, and buying works of Impressionist artists. He rented a studio and made his own paintings, one of which was exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1876. He went on to exhibit his work in 4 Impressionist shows during the 1880s, even though painting was still a hobby for him. When the European stock market crashed in 1883, Gauguin lost his job. Even though he felt pressure to support his family, He abandoned the idea of taking another regular job. All he wanted to do was paint, even if it meant leaving his wife and children. Paul Gauguin painted this view of the Seine River in 1875. At that time, he considered painting a hobby. A new direction. Gauguin began developing his own style, one that was more abstract than that of the Impressionists. He believed in painting from imagination rather than copying what was really in front of him, and a method that he referred to as synthetism. Gauguin used line, shape, and color to synthesize observations of nature with an emotional response to what he saw. Shapes on a canvas didn't have to look realistic. It was more important to capture the impact of real images on his memory. "Don't paint from nature too much," he said. "Art is an abstraction. Derive this abstraction from nature while dreaming before it, and think more of the creation that will result." Gauguin used line, shape, color to synthesize observations with emotional responses. In search of paradise. Gauguin became increasingly disenchanted with Impressionism and the commercial Paris art scene. He began searching for a place to live away from the pressures of urban life, where he could focus exclusively on painting the beautiful landscapes of his dreams. In France, he traveled to Brittany and then to Arles, where he had his brief tempestuous stay with Vincent Van Gogh, but he had little success selling his paintings and struggled to survive. In 1891, he sailed to the French colony of Tahiti in the South Pacific. He hoped that he could exist for next to nothing there while living off the land, but he didn't know how to farm and was forced to buy expensive canned food. He also found to his disappointment that the picturesque island was already under the influence of Western culture. In Tahiti, however, Gauguin's approach to painting took a new direction. Here we have, in Tahiti, Gauguin began using colors, shapes, and lines in new ways, as you can see in his self-portrait and Mangoes. Gauguin lived in a grass hut and wrote about island life for months before ever putting a brush to canvas. Then, instead of painting the reality that was before him, he depicted the heaven on earth of his imagination, the Tahiti that he'd been looking for. His dreamy landscapes of deep blues, lush greens, vibrant reds and yellows, and harmonious shapes were populated with innocent islanders unspoiled by the corruption of the outside world. La Orana Maria, or Hail Mary, is one of the first paintings that Gauguin made in Tahiti. He painted Mary and Jesus as Tahitians, reflecting the fact that missionaries had converted the inhabitants to Catholicism. A dark-haired angel with golden wings reveals a vision of Mary and Jesus to two women as they approach, with hands folded in prayer, dressed in a cotton garment called a pareu. Mary holds her son on her shoulders. Mary and Jesus both gaze at the viewer, intrigued by religious beliefs. Gauguin incorporated symbolism to give the painting a feeling of mystery. La Orana Maria. Gauguin based his composition of La Orana Maria on a photograph of an Indonesian relief sculpture. The title of the painting, which he added in the lower left corner, is the Tahitian translation of the first two words of the song, Ave Maria. Gauguin was intrigued by the way that Tahitians came to accept Christianity and absorbed it into their native culture. La Orana Maria. In La Orana Maria, Gauguin painted verdant, flowering trees and shrubs, tropical palms, and in the foreground, bowls overflowing with fruit. He used simplified organic shapes with strong outlines. Instead of copying the energetic brushwork of the Impressionist and other post-Impressionists, Gauguin filled the shapes with smooth strokes of color. The color is bold and imaginative with a tropical flavor. Keeping in mind how Gauguin felt about native life in Tahiti, what emotion do you think he wished to convey through his use of line, shape, and color? La Orana Maria, or Hail Mary, one of the first paintings that Gauguin made in Tahiti, reflects Gauguin's interest in religion. A dark-haired angel with golden wings reveals a vision of Mary and Jesus to two women whose hands are folded in prayer. Gauguin depicts Mary and Jesus as Tahitians, reflecting the fact that missionaries had converted the inhabitants of the island to Catholicism. Gauguin's use of symbolism gives the painting a feeling of mystery. Gauguin uses colors in a bold and imaginative way. The Tahitian women walk on a blue path touched with pinks and greens. The distant fields are creamy yellow-orange and pink. Palm trees take on blue hues. Gauguin created simplified organic shapes outlined with strong lines and filled with smooth color. The lines, abstracted shapes, and colors created decorative patterned composition. How does the combination of color, line, and shape affect the mood of the painting? Gauguin created. Vincent Van Gogh was born in the Netherlands in 1853, the eldest son of a minister. At 16, he left home to work for an art dealer. He then tried teaching and ministering to the poor, but nothing seemed to suit him. At 27, he found his passion, painting. His first major painting was The Potato Eaters. In 1886, Van Gogh moved to Paris to live with his brother, Theo, an art dealer. In Paris, Van Gogh met Degas and other Impressionists and befriended Gauguin. Van Gogh experimented with bold colors and also studied Japanese prints and their innovative use of color, line, and perspective. Here we see Vincent Van Gogh's painting style change dramatically during his brief career as an artist. The Potato Eaters in 1885 is a dark, earthy scene of peasants at their humble meal, compared to Wheat Fields with Crows in 1890, characteristic of Van Gogh's emotional approach to painting with bold colors and energetic brushwork. And let's compare that with The Gleaners. Van Gogh's favorite painter was Jean-Francois Millet. Van Gogh revered the way that Millet painted peasants with truth and simplicity, letting the dignity of their work shine through in such works as The Gleaners. Van Gogh and Arles. Even though Paris was acknowledged center of the art world at the time, offering unsurpassed collections and the chance to meet with other artists, Van Gogh was never happy living there. In 1888, he headed for the south of France and rented a small yellow house in Arles, where the landscapes and the light were just what he hoped for. He was filled with ideas of what to paint and worked day and night. For days on end, he hardly took the time to eat or drink. Like Gauguin, Van Gogh was more interested in using color to express his emotional response to a scene, rather than using color to make a realistic copy of the subject. His energetic brushstrokes added an element of intensity and movement to his paintings. Van Gogh painted Bedroom in Arles, his sleeping quarters, in the Yellow House in 1888. He painted Gauguin's chair, complete with pipe, while the two artists were housemates in Arles. Wheat Fields with Crows. Van Gogh's unhealthy work habits, poor nutrition, loneliness, and troubled moods compelled him to leave Arles. He moved to Auvergne in northwest France to be near Dr. Paul Bichette, a well-known physician who treated cases of depression. On days when Van Gogh felt well enough, he packed his art supplies and walked to nearby fields of wheat that seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. To make the painting Wheat Field with Crows, he set up his easel at a point where a path branched in 3 directions. In Wheat Field with Crows, an unseen wind sends ripples through the wheat and beats it down. Overhead, crows head for shelter from the gathering storm. Here is Dr. Paul Bichette. Dr. Paul Bichette was an amateur painter and friend to famous artists such as Cézanne. For that reason, Theo Van Gogh considered Bichette an excellent choice to treat his brother Vincent. But the patient concluded that the doctor is sicker than I am. Van Gogh painted this melancholy portrait of Bichette in 1890. In 1990, the painting sold at auction to a private collector for a record $82.5 million. It has not been seen in public since. Van Gogh's color and brushwork. Van Gogh painted Wheat Field with Crows in the last year of his life. He laid down slashes of blue-black to convey the ominous sky, with swirling light blue brushstrokes for the low, roiling clouds. In a dazzling play of light, the sun burnishes the wheat fields in rich hues of yellow, Van Gogh's favorite color. He placed the vibrant blues and yellows next to each other to intensify the effect of each, with the paint laid down as thick as toothpaste. Van Gogh's post-impressionist use of emotional color and energetic brushwork in Wheat Fields with Crows opens the door to interpretive speculation. Do the turbulent sky and the paths leading nowhere tell of sadness, confusion, of loneliness? Does the path leading to the horizon tell of hope? What does this painting say to you? Explore Wheat Field with Crows. How do Van Gogh's expressive colors and energetic brushwork affect how you feel about this painting? Unappreciated Genius. Only one of Van Gogh's paintings was sold during his lifetime. Decades passed after his death before people appreciated the artist's brilliance. He was only 37 when he died, and he painted for only 10 years. Yet the 800 paintings that he left behind blazed a new path for modern artists who came after him. Quiz time! How did Gauguin's post-impressionist style differ from the impressionist style? Gauguin used bold colors to convey emotion. How did Van Gogh use color to convey emotion in Wheatfield with Crows? Van Gogh placed vibrant, contrasting hues next to each other, intensifying the color of each. What did Gauguin and Van Gogh think was the most important approach to creating art? They believed that an artwork should record the artist's emotional response to a subject rather than be a realistic representation.